5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are live. Coming to you live. It's been live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, the world has changed. Donald Trump is now president, and he is using his executive powers to an unprecedented degree to try to reshape fundamentally American life in this country.
No doubt. Let's take this step by step. So, as you mentioned, Donald Trump has been inaugurated for the second time as the 47th president of the United States. His inauguration happened yesterday, January 20th, 2025, and immediately became, I think he signed like 26 executive orders, making it the largest day one of executive orders in American history.
Not only is it the largest, it's the largest by a wide margin. Typically, in the modern era, last 100 years or so, incoming presidents either don't issue executive orders on their first day or maybe issue one. The all-time record was actually held by Joe Biden when he came in 2021, and he issued 9 executive orders to an extent in response to changing the executive orders that his predecessor, Donald Trump, had issued. So 26 is nearly triple the record number of executive orders. And these are not minor administrative adjustments. These are huge, sweeping executive orders that, if they stick, will fundamentally change the nature of our society in the United States. Now,
Right. Wait, hold on. Before you go, yeah, we'll get into those executive orders in more detail later. I first just want to thank, we have a sponsor of today's video, which is Ground News. You'll hear from more of them later. Now, go ahead, Dad. You were going to continue.
yeah, Ground News is a great organization that analyzes news reports for you. Now, why did Trump break precedent so significantly to almost triple the record number of executive orders in modern American political history?
I don't
There
know.
are a
You
number.
you tell me, Dad.
I'm about to tell you.
Thanks.
Number one, this is who Trump is. He has said repeatedly, I can do whatever I want as president. And he is proving that. He doesn't need to go through the democratic process of getting legislation passed through Congress. He is the unilateral executive empowered to do anything that he needs to do to implement his agenda and advance, of course, his own personal interests as well. As we know, he has numerous conflicts of interest with his businesses, his investments, and his executive position. Secondly, he knows how precarious his position is with the Congress. Uh, Given that a number of Republicans have left either to take a position in the Trump administration or, in the case of Matt Gaetz, a resignation, they just have a 217 to 215 margin in the House.
Mm,
They can't afford to lose more than one single vote
good
if they're
point.
going to get anything through the House. And that is an incredibly precarious position. Thirdly, uh, Trump was actually in a stronger position in his first term, or at least as strong, when he also had Republican control of both houses of Congress and a conservative Supreme Court dominated by Republican appointees. And he largely failed to get his agenda through Congress. He got the big tax cut through, but that was pretty much his single major legislative accomplishment. He never, for example, was able to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. We never had the big, beautiful infrastructure day that he promised. We never had legislation to build a border wall or to achieve his priorities on immigration. So those three reasons explain why Donald Trump has taken this extraordinary step to shatter the record of executive orders on day one. 26 executive orders. Before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit more about Trump's inauguration address and his follow-up remarks.
Yeah,
You know,
what'd you think about his speech?
I was appalled.
Oh,
Trump promised to be a uniter, not a divider. And what did he devote in the first part of his speech? To a vicious attack on the previous administration, to paint a false, dark picture of the country, to air once again all of his personal grievances. And then he went on to do something you almost never see in an inaugural address. It's more like a State of the Union,
what?
a elaboration of his particular priorities, all of which were Trumpian, Republican policy positions, none of which reached out to the opposition, offered any kind of compromise, offered any hope of governing on a unified bipartisan basis. So I think there were real problems with the speech and the follow-up. The other thing was fact checkers, don't take my word for it, the fact checkers in multiple venues documented almost as many lies as executive orders on
Uh-oh.
Donald Trump's first day. They documented at least 20 lies in the inauguration address and his subsequent remarks. I'm not going to go through them all, just mention a few. He said under Biden, inflation reached record levels. Blatantly false. Inflation at a maximum during the Biden administration was just over 9%. You know what the record actually was, Sam?
No.
13.7%. Not even remotely close to record inflation. He politicized once again the tragedy of the wildfires and the hurricanes, falsely claiming, there was no response to the wildfires when in fact courageous, hundreds, maybe thousands of first responders and firefighters are risking their lives, fighting to exhaustion, fighting that fire. And in fact, to a great extent, they have brought it under control. It's also a total lie that the Biden administration did not respond to the hurricanes in North Carolina or Florida and diverted money to the migrants. He, of course, repeats his lies about the threats posed by undocumented immigrants, that they're these vicious killers, when in fact they are the most law-abiding segment of our society, committing crimes, including violent crimes, as shown by multiple studies. And Trump never cites any studies for what he says. They commit violent crimes and crimes less than one half the rate of native-born Americans. In subsequent remarks, he repeated his lie that the 2020 election was stolen from him. He repeated his lie that he ordered 10,000 National Guard to protect the Capitol, and Nancy Pelosi, who had nothing to do with protecting the Capitol, somehow rescinded that non-existent order. One could go on and on, but these are not small lies. These are huge lies that lie at the heart of Donald Trump's approach to politics and his approach to the presidency. It's based to a great extent on real fabrications. Now, what
Now,
about executive orders?
do you want me to list
You know,
some for you?
what's that?
I have a big list. Do you want me to list some notable ones that he did?
Well, no, I want to just highlight a few, if that's okay, and comment on them, if I
Sure.
may.
Sure.
Donald Trump, in his inaugural address, promised to introduce a new golden age of law and order and respect for the police. And what did he do on his very first day when it came to law and order and respect for the police, Sam?
He pardoned the January 6th folks.
Yeah, some 1,500 pardons, a number of other clemencies, including pardoning individuals who violently attacked police officers on January 6th. 140 police officers were injured by these violent rioters who Trump then pardoned. One of the police officers who was badly injured by the rioters, I think, went on television yesterday or today and said this is a fundamental betrayal of police forces. This is a fundamental betrayal of what happened to me. And by the way, I think there were 4 police officers who subsequently committed suicide. There were a number of deaths, directly or indirectly, as a result of this violent insurrection. The New York Times put it very well. They said, forget law and order, forget protection of the police under Donald Trump. What Donald Trump has done with these pardons is essentially said it's okay to commit crime, including violent crime. It's okay to assault and injure and maybe even cause the death of police officers, so long as you do it in the name of Donald Trump. And that really says it all. This has nothing to do with law and order, nothing to do with the respect for the police, but has everything to do with Donald Trump using every means possible, including unlawful means, to seize and maintain power. It's an absolute violation. And even a few Republicans who almost never criticized Donald Trump cringed at this incredible set of pardons that flies in the face of law and order and respect for the police. Let me look at some of the others. He has withdrawn from the Paris Accords on climate change. And what has he said is his big policy on energy going to be, Sam?
Not only said, he's enacted a bunch of executive orders about drilling
Yeah,
and oil
drill, drill,
production.
drill. And meanwhile, other executive orders blocking conversion to alternative sources of energy. And they're in the process of scrubbing any reference to climate change in any of the federal agencies. It's as if climate change does not exist. This is one of the most cynical, dangerous, destructive actions that any president has ever taken. Don't take my word for it. Look at the 2009 businessman letters, 15 years ago, when climate change wasn't nearly as bad or manifest as it is today. The businessman's letter to Barack Obama 15 years ago, on the eve of the Copenhagen Summit on Climate Change, said that climate change, unless we take drastic action to combat climate change, the consequences for our planet are going to be catastrophic, and we can make the conversion and actually improve, not undermine the economy. Who signed that letter, Sam?
The Trump family.
The entire Trump family. That was 15 years ago, when the science was less certain, when climate change was less manifest. But Donald Trump realized that he had to become a climate change denier in order to make it in Republican politics, even though he knows full well the catastrophic consequences of drilling, 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 putting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, blocking the conversion to clean, renewable sources of energy. And who is going to be hurt by this? It's not going to be Donald Trump and his rich friends. They have the money and the power and the connections to insulate themselves from climate change. It is going to be those ordinary working class Americans who voted for Donald Trump. It is ordinary Americans who always suffer the brunt of any kind of environmental degradation and are going to be the ones who suffer most from Donald Trump's retrograde policies on climate change, which puts them out of step with virtually every other country in the world. He's also withdrawn from the World Health Organization, which means it's going to make it more difficult for the United States to combat the next pandemic. And we know how horribly Trump dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic. His own head of his own COVID-19 task force, Dr. Deborah Birx, said that his response was so bad that it likely caused unnecessarily the death of more than 100,000 Americans. And we know it plunged us into one of the worst recessions since the Great Depression. He has said, he wants to drain the swamp. He doesn't want the bureaucracy to be politicized. But what has he done? He has tried to convert tens of thousands of civilly service protected federal employees into political employees so Donald Trump can fire them and put in his own loyalists, making the federal bureaucracy more biased, more political than it ever has been in the history of the country. We also saw that reflected in all of his appointments. Virtually every one of them has been appointed on the qualifications of being a Donald Trump loyalist. You know, he said, we are going to have a meritocracy. We're going to abolish diversity, equity, and inclusion, and only do things on merit. Yet, a whole slew of his appointees have no merit, have no qualifications for the job that he appoints them to, including some major positions. Pete Hegseth at Defense. The question proves he knows little or nothing about what's going on in the world. He has no managerial experience or leadership experience in defense. The one managerial job he had, testimony showed he botched it. Independent analysts said he wouldn't even qualify for a mid-level leadership position in the military, much less for Secretary of Defense. Then we have for the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who has no experience in the intelligent world, and who is best known for cozying up and supporting some of the worst murderous dictators in the world, who deposed Assad of Syria and, of course, Putin of Russia. Then we have RFK Jr. to head the health operations of this country, a anti-vax denier, a proponent of junk science, who proposed, instead of vaccines, which have saved hundreds of thousands of lives on COVID-19 and many millions of lives on other vaccinations, he said, well, we shouldn't have these vaccinations. We should have hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, which science have shown have no effect on COVID-19 and have very negative and drastic side effects. So much for the idea of the best people, a society run entirely on merit. His appointees trash the idea of merit and instead substitute only loyalty to Donald Trump. And then, you know, he says, we're going to respect the Constitution. And what has he done to trash the Constitution, Sam?
I don't know what you're referring to.
14th Amendment,
No idea.
birthright citizenship.
Oh, right.
14th Amendment makes crystal clear, it's part of the Constitution, that those born in the United States are what, Sam?
Citizens.
Citizens, unless that, so long as their parents are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That excludes only diplomats who have diplomatic immunity. Obviously, immigrants, documented or undocumented, are under the jurisdiction of the United States. In fact, Trump has proven that, right? Because he said he's going to use the power of government, the jurisdiction of the United States, to do what? To undocumented immigrants.
I'm not paying attention much today, so you just keep
Oh,
going.
to deport them, right?
Oh, yeah.
If they weren't subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, he couldn't be doing that. So his own actions contradict what he has said about the plain meaning of the 14th Amendment, which was reaffirmed, I think it was in 1898, by a conservative Supreme Court, which said plainly, of course, you know, this covers the children born in the United States, regardless of the immigration status of their parents. He also, and that has already been challenged, I think, by 22 states. He also, I think, violated a law, maybe not the Constitution, the Posse Comitatus law back in the 19th century, which says you can't use the military for domestic law enforcement. And yet he has proposed using the military for law enforcement at the border. That is also very likely to be challenged. He has also issued an order saying all federal employees need to return to the office, which is going to add to pollution, to expense, to clogged roads. But, who's going to benefit from this? His buddies in commercial real estate, because all of a sudden, because all of these people going back to the office, the value of commercial real estate is going to soar. Even though studies show that hybrid work actually is at least or more productive than forcing people, regardless of their job status and what it means to go back to the office. This is just a quick and dirty recitation of
Dirty?
some of the executive orders. He also is undermining ordinary people as well by making it more difficult to get coverage under the Affordable Care Act. 24 million people have gotten coverage under that act. It is highly popular. It's been highly successful, and also undermining the efforts of the Biden administration to bring down drug crisis. There is virtually nothing in any of these executive orders that are going to help the ordinary middle class and working class Americans who voted for him. They're going to be more subject to the ravages of climate change than ever before. It's going to be harder for them to get health insurance. It's going to be harder for them to get inexpensive drug prices. And if he goes ahead, as he proposed, as we move on to impose sharp tariffs, that is going to increase the price of the goods and services that ordinary Americans have to pay for. There is virtually nothing here that actually helps other than hurts ordinary Americans. There's a lot here, though, that helps his billionaire friends who have been genuflecting so shamelessly to Donald Trump. And of course, we have the so-called, what is it, the Dodge, the Department, Office of Government Efficiency, headed by the richest person in the world, Elon Musk. It was also supposedly co-directed by Ramaswamy, but he's opted out. So now Musk has virtually total power. And if you believe the richest man in the world is out for your interests as a middle class or working class American, rather than his own interests and the interests of his billionaire buddies, I have a big bridge in my hometown of Brooklyn that I would love to sell you. A couple of other things,
Wait.
unless you've got some more on this, Sam.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are a ton of executive orders, and there is a silver lining in all this for some, is most or a lot of these will be fought in court. I mean, executive orders are very powerful, but I know, for example, on the birthright citizen executive order, 22 states have already
22 states.
Right. So these aren't set in stone yet. It's pretty scary, but there is still hope. I encourage people to go to whitehouse.gov/presidential-actions. And there you can see, this is a White House website, every executive order he ordered on his first day. There are 5 pages of it, so you can go there and see it for yourself. I wanted to point out a couple other ones that I thought were pretty interesting. He also put a federal freeze on, or a freeze on federal hiring. He decided that he's going to review the investigative actions of the Biden administration. He's going to grant top security clearances to White House staff without going through traditional vetting processes. On immigration on the border, obviously we talked about birthright citizenship. We talked about the national emergency. But he's also going to bar asylum for newly arriving people at the southern border and resume his Remain in Mexico policy. He made an executive order that recognizes only 2 sexes, male and female.
And that limits protections for LGBTQ peoples
Yes.
that were enacted under Biden.
In terms
Again,
of,
how does this help any ordinary American? Any of this?
it doesn't.
None of it.
On the energy and the environment, he has made an executive order on opening the Alaska wilderness to oil and gas drilling. He has halted the leasing of federal waters for offshore wind farms and eliminated the environmental justice program across the government. You mentioned the World Health Organization. There are a few more that I found interesting, sort of in the miscellaneous category, which were that he's going to rename Denali and the Gulf of Mexico, Denali back to Mount McKinley and the Gulf of Mexico to America. He made an executive order because he was so pissed about this, about flying the American flag at full staff on all future inauguration days. And he made an executive order revoking security clearances for the 51 signers of a letter suggesting that the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop could be Russian disinformation. So those
This
are
is incredible. So on
right.
the
So
one hand, he denies security clearance
right,
just because they were critical of a position that he favored. And then he has essentially eliminated the vetting of security clearances for those who are coming into his staff.
yeah,
Another, fundamental contradiction in what he's doing.
right. So I just want to go through those as well as some other adding on
So
to your
we could
analysis.
spend, the entire hour going through them all. I think we've given you a pretty comprehensive view of what this is all about and
Yes.
what it means for you, for you, for us Americans that are not in Trump's inner circle, that are not billionaires, who stand to benefit from what Trump is doing. A couple of other quick things. Uh, what do you make, Sam, of Elon Musk's what looked like twice a Nazi salute?
Well, don't do it. Don't reenact it.
I would never do it. I'm just
What?
showing what he did.
Right. Do I think he was doing the Nazi salute? No. In the context of the clip, he was talking about something from the bottom of his heart. So I think he was essentially extending his hand from his heart out to the audience. But it was
But
sketchy.
it looked
It looked
really
really
bad.
weird. It looked. I agree.
Put it in context. He has supported the worst, most extremist, far-right European parties that come closest to mirroring the ideology of the Nazis. They're not Nazis, but I'm saying they come as close as major political parties do to mirroring the racist ideology of the
So
Nazis.
you think he was doing a Nazi salute?
I'm not going to say that. I'm just saying, you know, it's very strange in context. For anyone else, I would say, of course, this was just an emotional expression. When it comes to Elon Musk, who knows?
Eli Musk.
Elon Musk, who knows? Again, you got to put things in context. You got to understand, where he stands and the kinds of people, that he has supported.
But don't you think that in the context of what he was saying, again, he was talking about something from the bottom of
I
his heart.
agree. I agree. For anyone else, I would say, and I'm not even willing to say he was consciously mimicking the Nazi salute. Of course not. I'm just saying it's a little bit suspicious in context.
Yeah, I totally agree that it looked really sketchy and weird and was
It
just, I
really
mean,
did.
even if it wasn't, it was just a weird, neurotic twitch
Yeah.
that he was doing at the very
In
least.
the context of other, weird things he's done to support far right-wing extremists.
Right. Do you want to
And the
talk?
other thing that I want to mention before we get to questions is Trump's very strange remark. Did you catch that about Elon Musk in Pennsylvania?
Yes, I have the quote here. This
Yeah,
is Trump on Elon Musk, he said during a rally, I think it was the day before his inauguration, right?
I think that's right.
Someone fact
I'm not
check me on
sure,
that, but
but
I'm
he,
not.
he did say it. Go
But
ahead.
this is Trump on Musk. Quote, he knows those computers better than anybody. All those computers, those votes counting computers, and we ended up winning Pennsylvania like in a landslide. I mean,
Vote counting computers.
that is a
Not
sketchy.
computers. Vote counting computers. That, I'm not going to monger conspiracy theories. But again, that is very, very strange. Again, when you put it into context of what was previously attributed to Musk, that long before the election had been called, he had this app which supposedly told him who won the election well ahead of time.
Yeah, as you know, I've been very hesitant to say anything about
Same.
election fraud or
Right.
interference, but this was the first time where I stopped and went, "What? What did you say? You're talking about how he knows these vote
Vote
counting
counting
computers super
computers.
well," and then goes on to talk about how that how big he won in Pennsylvania. At the very, very least, it's extremely sketchy.
Very sketchy, just like the salute. Uh, the other thing, he didn't win Pennsylvania in a landslide. He won Pennsylvania by less than 2%, not even close to a landslide. He also claimed he won big with the young people's vote. I forget what number he put out, but it was some very large number. When in fact, he lost, no matter how you define it, he lost the 35 and under vote to Harris. He also claimed, I think he won one of the southern states by 48 points when he only won it by 30 points. You can't trust anything that Trump says because he just makes things up as he goes along. And it's worked for him. He's been elected president twice. He has never been held accountable for anything. He's been rewarded for these lies.
Yeah, I that that Trump quote baffled me. So
It really baffled me. I'm no expert on tech voting technology, but boy, combined with the earlier revelation about Elon Musk knowing well ahead of time who won, it's sketchy. I'm not making any claims that this election was rigged or there was fraud, but these things do raise you know a bit of suspicion. Uh, I would have to say. And of course, he continues to say the election in 2020 was stolen from him. He won in a landslide. Well, what did the Democrats then forget to cheat in 2024? You know, and let him win? It just makes absolutely no sense. But it doesn't matter. This has all worked for him. So why change? He's never going to change.
right. All right. Any final thoughts about our new president, Donald Trump, before we move on?
None of this is a surprise. You
Right.
know, this is how authoritarians take root when people don't take them seriously. Oh, he doesn't really mean these things. He's just joking. He's just saying these things. Well, we now know he really means virtually everything he said, and he's trying to carry it out now.
All right. With that, we will hear a
Oh,
word.
one positive, I think it's positive, a big AI initiative. I don't know much about that. You know more about that than I do, but that could be a positive development.
I haven't heard anything about this. This is an executive
And
order.
$100 million devoted to developing
Oh,
advanced artificial intelligence. I
okay.
mean, that's a double-edged sword. It could be of great benefit for humanity, or it could be just another way of controlling and manipulating us.
I don't know anything about it. I haven't looked into it.
Yeah, that's all I know.
Okay.
Probably people in our audience know more.
All right. With that, we will take a break and hear a word from our sponsor, Ground News.
I want I want to talk to you again about accuracy and bias in the media. Ground News is a website and app that I use that pulls articles from all over the world and organizes them by story. With Ground News, you can compare how different outlets cover the same story, complete with context and visual breakdowns of the sources. You'll see details like their political bias, reliability, reporting practices, and ownership, which is critical. These ratings are created through three independent news monitoring organizations. For example, take the story, quote, Congress formally certifies Trump election win, unquote. There are over 600 news sources for this story, with 38% of the bias being from the center. It's also great to see that 73% of these sources are rated as highly factual, and 11% of them are independent sources. Take a look at the bias comparison, which gives you an AI summary for the left, center, and right sources. Examining the headlines further, sources from the right focus on terms like certifies, exhausted Democrats, and Democrats cling, whereas the left headlines focus on terms like a good day for democracy, peacefully, and routine. The blind spot feed highlights news stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum. You know how much I care about combating misleading information. Ground news helps you see through misleading narratives and stay informed without being overwhelmed. So go to ground.news/Allan, Allan, or scan this QR code to subscribe. My link saves you 40% on their top tier Vantage plan, which I use to access all their features. That's only $5 a month in a world where news moves fast and the truth is hard to find. It's important to be using ground news to see the full perspective. Plus, by subscribing, you're directly supporting my work.
All right, thank you to Ground News. A couple housekeeping things. We got 2,100 people watching, but only 700 likes. So if you're watching, please like the stream. That'll help a lot. Subscribe, click the notification bell so you know that we're live. Our socials are right here if you want to follow us below. All right, Dad, you ready to get in some
Don't
questions?
forget, we need members.
I got it,
Member
Dad.
donations help.
Are you ready to get into some questions?
I'm always ready.
Always. There's not a
Always.
moment.
You know me not to be ready.
No, I haven't actually.
Hey,
There you
and
go.
I'm getting ready for the Senior Olympics too.
All right. Our first question is from our moderator, Jeff Crusan. Shout out to all of our moderators.
Sometimes I can see the questions on the chat, but I can't now.
That's because you were sitting next to me for the last 2 weeks and you
Ah,
were looking
okay.
at my computer. You're now in a
See,
different location.
that's why I have you.
That's
Being an old dinosaur,
it's
I need
funny.
you to educate me. All
People,
right, let's get the
it's funny
questions.
because people are always giving me suggestions like, make sure your dad does this or has this new camera or this microphone you guys don't. That shows you how technologically inept my dad is and how hard it
All
is.
right, enough of that.
Okay, enough. Jeff says, according to history, every time a president has been impeached, the party holding the White House always loses seats in the subsequent election. That being said, would it be wise for Democrats to avoid impeaching Trump again if they retake the House in 2026?
Actually, during the impeachment process of Bill Clinton, the Democrats did very well historically in the off-year elections of 1998, when in fact almost always the party in power suffers major losses. So I'm not sure that's entirely true. Plus, it's not clear what the party of Andrew Johnson really was. Was a Democrat, but he was taken in on the Union ticket of the Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. But unless the Democrats take the House and take it substantially in 2026, there's no chance they're going to impeach Donald Trump anyway. And I have said many times back, during the impeachment controversy, you can't base your impeachment on political calculations. It's got to be based on the case itself and whether the president merits impeachment because, as Hamilton put it, the president poses a real danger to the society. That was Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers.
Jeff clarified. He said he meant the party holding the House of Representatives, not the White House. I guess I read that wrong.
Well, yeah, let's see, the Republicans held the House of Representatives in 1998, not the Democrats.
Alrighty then. Our next question is from James Lagruta. Do you think Trump will be impeached a third time?
If the Democrats retake the House in 2026, it's possible. Obviously, it depends on what Trump does. And, Trump has shown himself that he believes he's above the law, that he can do anything he wants. And there's certainly a chance that he would commit an impeachable offense like he did twice in his 2 terms. Let's not forget, in the second impeachment, 7 Republicans voted to convict. We've never seen anything like that in the history of impeachments. That many members of the president's own party voting for conviction in the Senate. Plus, a number of senators have said, you know, we voted against impeachment because he's out of office, and we believe this is a matter for the criminal justice system, not a matter of impeachment. And of course, as we saw, Trump managed to thwart and undermine the political justice system with the support of his fellow Republicans.
President Belichick says this feels like the end of Reconstruction. After white Southerners were defeated in the Civil War, they spent 12 years undermining democracy and terrorizing black people to win in the end.
I think there was definitely some truth to that. The reaction to the Reconstruction period was called the redemption of the South, a terrible term. They did not redeem the South, but rather they devastated the South by restoring white supremacy, restoring control over the former Confederate states by white supremacists. That led to the long-term system of comprehensive discrimination known as Jim Crow, in which they snuffed out black voting through devices like the literacy test, the poll tax, the white primary, in which they segregated the schools, segregated public facilities, segregated public accommodations, segregated law enforcement, and that really lasted until from the late 19th century until it began to be dismantled by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And discrimination has not ended. As much as Donald Trump would want to tell you, there is no lingering discrimination. The overwhelming thrust of scholarship says just the opposite, that in fact minorities still suffer discrimination in every aspect of life: wealth, income, employment, education, healthcare, housing. The disparities are still stark and still exist. And this idea that we can just be a colorblind meritocracy flies in the face of everything we know about American history and American society. It has no basis in scholarship.
Right.
It's made up.
Arash Taheri says, I'm Iranian American. The Iranians believe that Trump will overthrow the... Sorry, my dog's going a little wild. The Iranians believe that Trump will overthrow the Islamic regime. As much as I want it to happen, I'm doubtful since Trump has no interest in foreign policy. What are your thoughts?
No chance that Trump is going to overturn the Islamic regime in Iran. In fact, he has kind of proposed just the opposite, a withdrawal of American involvement in the struggles within the Middle East. I see no chance that that's going to happen. Or even if he wanted to, I don't know how he would actually engineer that. He's certainly not going to invade Iran.
Channel 1 Texas says, can you comment on how off the rails Trump's speech went in Emancipation Hall? It was insane to hear him basically trash his own speech he just made in the rotunda just minutes before. I didn't watch that. Did you, Dad?
I didn't watch it, but I saw reports on it. And indeed, it was entirely the old Trump, doom and gloom, grievances, and even more lies, as I pointed out, in the subsequent speech than in the inaugural address. It was really Trump unleashed off the teleprompter. The audience member is absolutely right.
Our first Discord question from the night. If you want to join our Discord or our Reddit, the link to those are in the description of this video. This is from Mifes Questions. They say, what does it mean to sign an executive order to end federal government censorship of the American people?
I'm not sure what that means at all. In fact, censorship was not being done by the Biden administration. It was being done by Republican state governments in places like Florida and Texas, where they have banned, for example, any teaching, which is the overwhelming thrust of scholarship, as I said, that there is still racial discrimination existing in America, where they have presented a whitewashed, false view of American history that diminishes even the horrors and evils of slavery. And one, I think it's in Florida, one set of curricula points out, oh, how slaves learned useful skills. What a pile of nonsense. Any skills they learned, they can't accumulate wealth. They can't pass on wealth to their children. They can't own property. They can't have their own business. And in terms of the useful skills, they had like 15 examples, 12 of which were completely false, including the white sister of George Washington and an African American who was born in 1885, 20 years after the end of slavery. And then, of course, they banned books, censored what students can read, banned to whatever extent they could discussion of sexual orientation in the classroom. That's where censorship is occurring and burgeoning. Organizations that are against censorship, like the most prestigious organizations, PEN America, have roundly denounced what's going on in these red states as gross violations of free speech. So once again, Trump has utterly misled the American people on where the censorship is occurring and what is the nature of that censorship.
Jack Graham says, what do you think of Trump removing John Bolton's Secret Service security detail?
I thought that was really petty. Once again, this is Trump seeking revenge against his enemies, even though they might put those individuals in jeopardy. He's not far from where I live, actually, and I've seen the security there, and apparently they're there because he's gotten credible death threats. So this is just part of Trump's, revenge mission that he was, again, openly, explicitly telling us he was going to do as president.
Actress Druid says, can anything be done about Donald Trump rolling back the Biden-Harris rule to lower drug costs? Executive Order 1407. My mom is on
Yeah,
life-saving.
I talked about that.
I didn't finish.
How does
I
that
didn't,
help
Dad.
ordinary?
I didn't finish. They have a
Oh, sorry.
yeah. They said that their mom is on life-saving drugs and they can't afford it without help.
My heart goes out to you. I grieve for you. Uh, as I said, you know, Trump claims to be a populist. We had a whole session on this. He's the anti-populist. What he does actually hurts the ordinary workers and farmers, ordinary Americans that the populists represented. And this is unconscionable that he has undermined the Biden initiative to reduce the price of life-saving drugs for folks like your mom. The only thing you can really do to deal with this is go to court and challenge it. And you can challenge executive orders on two grounds. You can challenge them on the substance that they're illegal or unconstitutional, or you can challenge them procedurally that Trump did not follow proper procedure in issuing this executive order. And I wish you very good luck on that.
Building upon that, do you think the federal courts will actually stop the executive order on ending birthright citizenship, since it's literally in the Constitution?
Uh, I think the lower courts probably will, because conservatives on the courts have said we are originalists, we are textualists, we believe in interpreting the plain meaning of the Constitution as it was understood. And the plain meaning of the birthright citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment, as it was understood in the 19th century, reaffirmed by the Supreme Court, was that it covered essentially everyone born in the U.S. except those born of those with diplomatic immunity. So if conservatives are true to their own creed, they clearly will reaffirm the decision of the 19th century Supreme Court. But who knows, what this Supreme Court might do. I'm not going to predict it.
Um, so with all these executive orders, does this put Trump on the way to securing the major policy change key?
Probably does. Absolutely. Uh, Provided, most of them stick. Yes, it's so fundamentally different from what the policies of the Biden administration. I mean, just look at the withdrawal from the Paris Accords, the withdrawal from the World Health Organization, this unconscionable attack on uh, efforts to reduce drug prices. I can go on about all of these things that contradict the policies of the Biden administration. So, yes, I would expect Trump to win the policy change key,
Gotcha.
or his administration, presuming he's not going to violate the Constitution again and run for a third term.
I'm not sure if I entirely understand this question, but I'll throw it to you. Maybe you'll understand it. The question is, how much resistance has Trump dealt with so far since yesterday?
Well, essentially none from his own
Right. That's what
party.
I mean. Yeah, none. Right.
Yeah, a few of the more moderate, the very few, have expressed some reservations about his pardons, but basically, his executive orders have sailed through with little resistance from, or none from Republicans who control the government, and not as much feedback as you might expect from Democrats or from the mainstream media.
Yeah, and we did talk about certain states suing over the birthright citizenship executive order, but
But the two that have gotten the most uh, blowback on are obviously the birthright citizenship and the pardons.
right.
What
With
you can do about the pardons? They're not executive orders. They are
right,
an exercise of a constitutional, explicit, enumerated function of the presidency.
right.
It cannot be even reviewed by the courts.
With Trump in office now, what are the chances of America transitioning to one-party state authoritarianism? Could Trump's second term be the first step towards authoritarianism?
I've talked about that, for a very long time. And yes, that is very, very possible. He's talked about saying, oh, you're not even going to have to vote again, my dear Christians, 4 years from now. Pretty ominous. He has proposed a series of election law changes that would make it much more difficult for people to vote, including eliminating early voting, eliminating same day registration, imposing stringent criteria for identification, drastic purges of voter registration rolls, documentary proof of citizenship. I could go on, but yes, I'm not predicting that's going to happen, but we are on the precipice. I've said many times, right? Democracy is precious, but like all precious things, it can be destroyed. And really, in terms of any significant manifestation of democracy around the world, it's only 100 years old. It really only dates, for the most part, to the post World War I period. For the great swath of world history, democracy is barely a speck. Rulership has been by divine right, by birthright, or by conquest.
Are you worried that Trump's followers, like the pardoned January 6 rioters and pro-Trump Jews like Lizzie Savsky, might be used for vigilantism like Mao's Red Guard?
I'm very worried about that. Again, I'm not going to predict it, but certainly those who are knowledgeable about those factors have warned us against that. And, you know, I have a new book coming out called Conservative at the Core, a new history of American conservatism, in which I point out the many, many times that Trump has invoked and sanctioned violence. He doesn't seem to shrink from that. So, yes, I'm not predicting it, but that's something to keep your eye on.
Do you think Trump's executive order on immigration can lead to ICE raids, expulsions, and deportation to those involved in the spring campus protests across the country, including Arabs, Muslims, leftists, and foreign students?
Absolutely, it supposedly is limited only to undocumented immigrants, but there probably were quite a number of undocumented immigrants involved with that. Plus, the data we have documenting who is documented and undocumented, or even who is an American citizen and not an American citizen, is horribly flawed. There are a number of court decisions pointing out how bad the databases really are. And there are studies, again, I think by the Cato Institute, showing that detentions in places like Florida and Texas have swept up hundreds of American citizens. And it's not easy once you're detained to prove your release.
With President Trump declaring drug lords in Mexico as terrorists, what are the chances that he will task the Pentagon to take out some kingpins? What
I
what
think
will
the chances
what will
chances are excellent that he's going to do that. Uh, that may seem like a positive thing, a way of undermining the cartels, and it could have that effect. I'm not, dismissing that. But on the other hand, it could lead to much bloodier warfare between the cartels and law enforcement. It's bad enough already.
what are your thoughts on ICE and what can be done about ICE?
Trump has pretty much said ICE can do what it wants. And unfortunately, Democrats have been complicit in this. It's very sad. Uh, you know, what have I said defines American politics, Sam? One sentence.
Democrats have no spine and Republicans have no morals or something like that.
No principles. And
Principles.
there are the Democrats, not all of them, but a good number, joining with this new federal law requiring detention of undocumented immigrants who supposedly have committed crimes. We had a similar law in Florida, and I've studied that and pointed out these kinds of laws ensnare not just serious criminals, but law-abiding, undocumented immigrants who committed the most minor innocuous offenses, including, minor traffic offenses. And let's not forget, for all, the denigration of undocumented immigrants, they are the most law-abiding segment of our society, and they are the mainstay of the agricultural, the construction, the hospitality, and the personal service industry. They contribute tens of billions of dollars in tax revenue. You ravage the undocumented segment of our society, and you are going to have a major blow to our economy. Some economists have even suggested, depending on how big the effort is, it could push the nation into another recession.
What do you think of Trump having broken his promise to bring peace to Ukraine within the first 24 hours?
Yeah, again, if you believe that, let's buy my bridge in my hometown of Brooklyn. Trump makes all kinds of promises, right? We're going to build a beautiful wall. Mexico is going to pay for it. I'm going to slash the deficit when in fact he increased it by trillions upon trillions of dollars. I have this wonderful, better healthcare plan than the Affordable Care Act. And then, nearly a decade later, he says, well, I have some concepts on a healthcare plan. So you can put this promise about ending the Ukraine war on day one in the trash can with all those other promises. I'm going to slash grocery prices, right? It was a big theme of this campaign. And then once he's elected, he says, well, maybe I'm not going to really do that because that's really hard.
J. Pre Brenner says, are you open to a lecture on the history of budget reconciliation? Other than 4 no votes, is there anything now preventing Senate Republicans from overruling the parliamentarian to pass anything Trump wants through reconciliation, whether or not budget related?
Probably not. They control the Senate. They can do what they want. I'm not sure every Republican is going to go along with that. But you're really talking only two or three Republicans who are at least somewhat out of step with the Trump agenda. So that is definitely a very smart comment and something to watch. I think we're after 10, right?
Oh, I didn't even realize that. How many more questions you want?
Three.
Three more questions. Wow. This is exciting. What three
Very.
questions are next? That's the real question here. I've lost my place on my desktop. Okay,
Supposed
here
to
we
be
are.
young and not
I
old
know.
and
I know.
moderated.
I know. No Cam says, of the editions of your books on the keys, does it matter which edition I start with?
Well, I recommend the most recent. It recaps everything going back to 1860 and talks about, brings it up to date to the 2024 election. I think it's the seventh edition of the book, and it's readily available at Amazon and at the publisher Rowman and Littlefield.
I don't entirely understand this question, but maybe you will. Uh, what? Whoa. Uh, sorry. This is my questions got reordered. Here's the new question. Dr. Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman seemed legitimate in what they say about education and inequality, even though I tend to vote for people on the left. Their arguments about unintended consequences of certain policies and the importance of accountability in education make a lot of sense to me. I find myself reflecting on why their beliefs resonate with me despite my unusual political preferences. Do any of his ideas resonate with you, Professor, or spark thought on education and inequality?
Wow, I'm not a big fan of Thomas Sowell. He's a black conservative economist, or Milton Friedman, who believes in total laissez-faire, total government hands-off of the economy. I do not believe they have ideas that are going to advance our education system, but I do think, there is significant reforms that need to be made, but we seem to be going in the opposite direction of increasing political control over education to deny the findings of scholarship and impose ideological orthodoxy on educators. I think it's very important that we support organizations like Penn America that is fighting that. I think that's the real danger in our education system.
Right. Our final question of the night is, what are your thoughts on Trump saying that he wants to take back the Panama Canal in his speech? And can a president have the power to declare war on a country?
President does not have the power to declare war. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war. However, presidents have engaged in dozens, maybe hundreds of military actions without a declaration of war. When was the last declared war, Sam?
Um,
World War II.
right. I knew it was a
Vietnam
trick
War,
question.
Korean War, the Gulf War, the Iraqi War, the Afghanistan War, all of them have been executed by presidents under their powers as commander in chief without a declaration of war. And let's not forget, we didn't just hand the Panama Canal over to Panama. It's on their sovereign territory, and it was established by treaty, ratified by the United States Senate, something very rare in the modern era for the Senate to actually ratify a treaty. So it would take new action by the Congress to somehow, and I'm not sure how, overturn that. The president cannot unilaterally take the Panama Canal back. And I don't think, even though he probably could do it, Trump is going to invade Panama and then occupy the canal zone.
All right. With that, we will wrap up Lichtman Live. I've got really good news for everybody. You know what that good news is, Dad?
I don't.
The Lichtman Live post show is back. And
Wow, you're back.
It's back. And it's coming on right after we end here. I have put the link to that. I've pinned it in the chat. My channel is at Sammy Licht if you want to come hang out. It's a little bit more low key. Yeah, I mean, quite an episode. quite a few days with our new president. Again, I encourage everybody to go to the whitehouse.gov webpage and look at his presidential actions for yourself. There's also a good New York Times article called Trump's Executive Orders, Reversing Biden's Policies and Attacking the Deep State, which do a nice job of listing out sort of his main executive orders and linking to them as well. So I'd suggest you to check out that article. Dad, what are your final words to the people on this night? One night after the second inauguration of Donald Trump.
Has survived.
Say it again.
The new era has arrived. It's likely to survive. But if you want informed analysis based on history, based on our efforts to be as factual as possible, doesn't mean we can't make mistakes. We're human, of course we can, but we are trying to be as factual as possible, as historically accurate as possible, and to give you, throughout this new era, which is so critical, our best analysis and understanding of what's happening in America that is so unprecedented.
All right. Thank you so much. See you all in Lichtman Live's post show. Say goodnight to the people, Dad.
Good night. Catch the post show.